family. So it's families and not just students, individual students. So,
Great. Thank
yes. Thank you for that question. That was an important clarification. All right, hearing nothing else, we'll move on to number 5, which is an agreement with Common Ground School. This one's at students at Roberto Clemente. So is Ms. Edmonds Duff available, or somebody else to speak on this? I'm not seeing on my screen.
I can speak on that.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Connor?
You're muted.
You're back on mute.
It's similar to the previous one for outdoor experiences for the students at Clemente.
All right, it also includes field trips to the Common Ground site as well, it looks like here. Ms. DeMayo's shaking her head as well. So, okay, so this is in that same category of things happening on site. It looks at Roberto Clemente and things happening at the Common Ground site. Ms. Hannes? You're muted.
I just want to recommend that on the agenda itself, the dates are wrong.
Oh.
It says June 23. It should be June 24. I think there's I'm just catching them now. I apologize. Yeah, the ending dates need to be corrected.
All right, thank you. Yes, presumably it's not going backwards in time. Thank you. I missed it. All right, it looked like Ms. DeMayo was making a note of it. Dr. Yarborough?
Yes, thank you. Just a question for a future inquiry, whether it would be advantageous for the district to have a larger contract or agreement with Common Ground. You know, if there are advantages to doing it this way, school by school or activity by activity, then that would be great to know as well. But it seems that or that a number of schools engage Common Ground a lot for either Common Ground coming to make classrooms, outdoor learning at particular schools and train teachers, or to do field trips to their site. So if there's any advantage to having a larger contract with them, maybe we should consider it.
That sounds like it'd be a good conversation. It also might help on the Common Ground side for their internal planning, which might help reduce costs or help them with staffing if they know that something's going to be coming. So I know I think this is one of those in the category we've talked about. Should we have one giant contract or several smaller contracts, and things kind of go back and forth? Because I think at one point we were dismantling some larger contracts. Because there's also, if I remember right, some difficulties in some of these, sometimes with the funding coming from multiple sources and individual schools on individual timelines making decisions as to what works best for their programming. But I agree, if it can save funds or make things easier on staff applying to use these, that would be great. All right, next one looks like it's number 6, an agreement with Higher Heights Youth Empowerment Program. Is Mr. True available or somebody?
Oh, there he is. Sean, I was going to go for you. I didn't know you were here.
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So yeah, so it's a continuation with an agreement with Higher Heights. They work currently with our 11th and 12th grade students, providing assistance in FAFSA completion forms, and other particular key components that help support students to gain college experiences, tours, and so on and so forth. So that's what we're looking to continue with our relationship, our partnership with them this year.
All right, thank you. Are there comments or questions related to this? Dr. Yarborough.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the summative stats that you provided for our school district. Do you know through what year this is updated? Is this include the most recent school year?
I believe it may be. I'm not quite. I don't have it in front of me. I did work collaboratively with the person who put this together. That I'd have to take a closer look at, but I do believe, I think it is current.
Thank
Trying to
you.
scroll through it now as we speak.
Okay. And if not, if we could have current information for the positive impact and where our students go, that would be great to share. Thank you.
Yes, okay, absolutely. This is probably last year's data that is available to everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm looking at my notes and I don't remember if it was for this or for the next one with Higher Heights, because it looks like we have 2 in a row here. Was, yeah, on the data, was it like how far back? Because if I remember correctly,
Right.
this is the group we've been working with over close to 2 decades. And so the question was
Mhm.
just, it was 2 decades worth of numbers or a couple of years or 1 year, etc.
Yes.
And then I have it listed, I think, for number 8, but I'd have to no, for number 7, but it might be for, yeah, number 7, I think I have listed that this is, but not number 6. I'm sorry. I'm getting my numbers mixed up. We're on number 6. I have it in my notes for number 7 that one of these is listed as a sole source. I was just asking, has this been sole source designated by the New Haven Purchasing Department?
That's not mine. I put bids in.
You put, okay, so let me just open up number 6 here. Confirm that.
Mr. Wilcox, Higher Heights applied through the RFQ process because of the number of schools that are utilizing them. And they were scored, they started their programming in the summertime
Okay,
with some schools and continue on.
okay, that makes sense. So it's going through the approved RFQ process that we use for many other items. Okay,
Yes,
so yeah, that's just the constant flag that sole source has a specific meaning with the City of New Haven Purchasing Department and has to be designated by that. So, okay, so that
I didn't
makes,
catch it in the memo.
okay, that makes sense to me. I think those were my questions. Hearing nothing else on number 6, let's talk about number 7. So, Ms. Strand.
So echoing what Sean said, we've really felt great about having Higher Heights in our schools. So Maya Green has been our school college career counselor through them for the past 2 years. She's exceptional. She's a Hill House graduate, so she's also an amazing role model for the students. She is such a support to our school counselor. Having only one, it can be really difficult to reach all the families, all the students, help them understand all the things they need to do, go through the FAFSA process. And she's been incredibly valuable in those areas, as well as creating a joyful college going and career focused culture for our students, making sure they have post-secondary plans and that they're excited about them. The extra funding on ours is for a decision day. There's a smidge more, which we started last year, and it's they bring in representatives from the college, and there's banners and there's snacks, and it's really exciting. And the juniors can see, they walk by and see the seniors celebrating, and so they do a lot of things like that, where they get that information out, they build the culture in a way that gets students excited. And
That sounds great. Any comments or questions related to this? Yeah, I think that sounds great. Creating some excitement and also normalizing somebody who works at the university. It is easier to get into universities than some might think if you're not familiar with it, especially if you don't have family members that might have gone to a college or university. It sometimes seems insurmountable when in fact it's a checklist of you do number 1 and number 2 and number 3 and
exactly,
likely
and
going to get a
especially
positive decision. So just normalizing that you can do this and people will help is so important. Not just for this program, but for any of our college or career programs that lead to certifications and things.
Yeah.
All right. Hearing nothing else on this one. I think we're up to number 8, which is an agreement with the Capital Regional Education Council. Ms. Jackson.
Yep. This is a part of our efforts to increase special education staffing in our district. As you know, it's one of the leading shortage areas, not just for New Haven, but it kind of a national shortage area. So again, this is a program that we have with CREC to provide cross endorsement. We essentially pay for the cross endorsement for those teachers, general education teachers who are interested in becoming special education teachers. We have average anywhere between 3 to 5 teachers a year who in turn at some points in time in their career want to become special education teachers. And again, they are placed into our vacancies. So essentially this is the tuition for that program.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? Dr. Yarbrough?
Yes, Ms. Jackson, just a general appreciation for your efforts and work to pull in other partners that can help in the areas where we in particular need additional certification and staffing. And I think it comes up in a later contract that will come before us, but thank you for these cross endorsements and other partnerships.
Thank you for that.
I don't have any questions. I just have one comment. I had a conversation with one of our paraprofessionals recently, and I don't know if she was unaware of some of these possibilities or just like we were just talking about, not understanding that there might be help and things in place. I know you all in HR and people reach out to folks to let them know. I'm just saying that this is, refunding this is yet another good reason to do that, because this person, strikes me as someone who would be good moving into that role. But no matter how many times we put the message out, the message isn't always getting out there. So
no, that's true. And we can certainly find some additional ways on top of the ways that we currently advertise. And when it comes up to the later contract, I can talk a little bit about that process too.
okay.
Just for
I think it's also working with the union as well to make sure that their folks have the information, multiple ways of getting this information. All right, thank you very much. And we'll move on to number 9, which is an agreement with Connecticut State Community College Gateway Campus, which I guess is the new name for Gateway.
That it is. This is our program, our alternative program for our students who, again, needed an alternative programming for high school completion. Again, we've been running this program for quite some time. At some point, I think we do need to share some of the results of this program, but we continuously graduate students from this program. Both in the December and at the end of the school year. We had 32 graduates, I believe the number was from our last graduation this summer, but essentially it's for 50 students across the district.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? I'll just say 2 things. One is thanks for providing the contractor and assessment data. That's always helpful on these to have the actual data there. And then, which I think is what you typically do, Ms. Jackson. And then also, just on that point you were just making about, reporting back on the effectiveness of some of these things. This might be something like good for a board meeting presentation on some of these related programs. Because these are about, earning diplomas, alternative routes to getting a degree. You also have programs for earning college credit while in high school. And then we also have the different but similar programs for all the certification things. Just something that just shows and keeps the word out there about the many pathways that people have. That might be something there. I guess that's for you, Dr. Negron, and others of useful and positive presentation. All right, we'll move on to number 10, which is another agreement with ACES.
Okay.
Jackson.
This is number 10 is the the middle school portion. As you know, just given some of the complexity of social emotional behavior challenges that we've seen in the district, we've created an alternative program in collaboration with ACEs some years ago. This is for our middle school component of that program to provide services to 35 students.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? My question on this one is related to also number 12.
Yep.
Which is, you know, just how you evaluate their effectiveness of these programs. And then also that, you know, for these are two similar programs. I know they're different populations of students, same vendor. And I know in the past you've talked about you all have looked at bringing this back in-house or keeping it with ACEs. I'm just wondering where the current thinking is on that. I mean, obviously, you're putting the contracts here, so the current thinking must still be that this is useful, but if you could just elaborate on that.
So we believe it's fiscally responsible because the cost of students, for the students that we're talking about, these are students who are probably the most at risk. The cost for these students, if we otherwise had to outplace them, would be 2 and 3 times the cost per student, as you're seeing here in the contract. So whereby other districts, smaller districts, may have classrooms in district for these students, we have whole programs partnered with ACEs that essentially are doing the same thing by reducing the cost for out-of-district placement. It's just that the campus is not within New Haven Public Schools. So I would say there's always, there's always a desire to look at cost reduction. We have at one point in time created such a program in partnership in district. We were not as successful when we were bringing that program in-house in a particular building, but certainly if we have the right resources, the right personnel, the right building, we certainly are always looking for ways to reduce costs. But at this point in time, we know that ACEs is providing us with the best service for these students with this level of complexity.
Okay. Ms. Hannons, you had your hand up for
Yes,
this?
just one comment. Just one comment. As this grant has not been approved yet, could we
Pending
put in the notes pending receipt of funds
Okay. And that would be
on number 10?
no 10 and number 12. I was also talking about number 12 because they're somewhat related.
Yeah, of course, my phone just went off.
12 has it. We have it
Okay,
on 12.
12 has it.
It's on 12?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
on 12. We just didn't put it on 10.
All right, thank you. All right. All right, thank you, Ms. Jackson, for that overview of the thought process. I appreciate that.
You also asked one other question, Mr. Wilcox, about how we evaluate.
Oh, yes.
We do have evaluations based off of some feedback, but one thing that we have done in years past that we are going to be bringing back, we just hadn't done it post the pandemic, was we did a full evaluation of the school similar to our SQRs in district. We would hold a similar process with ACEs and asking them for similar information. And we plan to do that the same way, where we bring a interdisciplinary team over and looking at analyzing both their behavioral data, their instructional data, doing some walkthroughs and holding it similar to what we've done in district. And we plan to do that for the upcoming school year.
All right, thank you very much. All right, we'll jump to number 11, which is also with ACEs. This one's for assistive technology.
Yep, this is pretty much to provide assistive technology evaluation and direct support for those students who require it per their IEP.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? Hearing and seeing none. We already talked a little bit about 12, but could you just give us the overview of that one?
Yep, this is pretty much the K-5 program for students with complex social emotional behavioral needs. Just as a word, just so that you know, in the future, where this has been called Urban Youth, we've never liked that name. As we created the Aspire program, at some point in time, we are going to be calling this Aspire Elementary, so that there's some consistency going through, so that we can get rid of the name Urban Youth, but it will be that same program.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. Comments or questions on this one? Hearing none, we'll go with 13, which is an agreement with Common Ground Charter School, but a different kind of agreement with Common Ground Charter School. Ms. Jackson.
So this is the agreement with Common Ground. As you know, we are mandated by law to provide special education services and pay for special education services for our state charter schools. So this is one of the charter schools that has agreed to the contract amount and that has returned their contract to us. And this is the amount that we've agreed upon for this upcoming school year.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions on this one? All right. Thank you. Hearing none, we'll go on to 14. This one is with Highville Charter School.
It's the same explanation as a mandate for service. I will tell you that there's, and I'm sharing this now, I think I usually share this at this point in time every year. There are a couple of charter schools who may not necessarily be in agreement with what we are saying that we owe them. So right now, Booker T. Washington, last year, they did not even return a contract. They have not returned a contract as of yet, and we have not yet received one of Achievement First, at least since this time, but we will check back. Usually for the last couple of years, Achievement First has sent those back. But I'm sharing that because, again, I know that the board is talking a lot about making sure that we're not sending in contracts and providing service after the date. We do have those two contracts right now that are still out there where we're mandated to pay the service. But right now, it's really about the negotiation of the contract and where folks want more enough to be able to move forward. So I just want to make sure that I'm reminding the board of that ongoing issue.
Right, it's a two-way thing there. And the risk is, as I've said, and will continue to say, that if majority of the board says no to something is not approved, and then we're going to be in a messy situation. So thank you for providing the explanation. It should be avoided whenever possible, just because of that. We don't have board policy that says it can't happen. We have board policy that says contracts cannot be entered into without board approval.
Right.
So it's risky for the vendor as well as the district for them to be doing work that they don't have an agreement in place for. So to avoid legal issues, I appreciate everybody's vigilance on trying to get these done when the other side is amenable to doing that. Okay. Any other comments or questions on this one? Hearing none, we'll go on to agreement with number 15 with Pathways, Riverside, Connecticut.
I know the name, sorry. I know the name is a little misleading. This is, if you can remember, we just started this program last year. We used to have 3 alternative programs. We right now have 1. We created a program with Pathways, enough to be able to do a couple different things, try to provide somewhat of a continuum for students who could not even make it, or not even make it, but students who where Riverside was not appropriate. It gave another opportunity for students. And then also too, where we needed to keep students for a variety of reasons on different campuses, we now have another program, small program for 14 students.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions related to this? I'll just say, having some awareness of some of these programs, that yes, that is one of the things, one of the drawbacks of the district collapsing the 3 programs into one. It does create some building issues, and being able to have other pathways to help alleviate building tensions, as well as for these students that are quite often dealing with a huge amount of other issues where school becomes quite difficult to get to. So different pathways is necessary. Thank you. Number 16, agreement with Relay Hub, LLC. Ms. Jackson.
This is, we contract with them to provide our reimbursement for our students who have through Medicaid, who are Medicaid eligible and hold an IEP, where we can get reimbursement to the district. Right now, we pay for them, and when it says a 97,000, because there's a percentage of what they will get depending on how much they bring into the district. But it also is not just for the percentage. This is also, we have contracted with them to do the big heavy administrative lift because we felt that it was cheaper to pay them, because the 97,000 is not just the administrative cost, but it would be cheaper to pay them to do this administrative lift as opposed to having to pay for a full-time clerk with benefits. So they are doing dual duties. They get some reimbursement for what they collect and then also are doing some of the administrative lift.
If I remember correctly, in a previous year, you or somebody provided some information like this, the amount that we're getting back through these reimbursements that this company's filing for, and it was sizable.
Yeah, and I will tell you that Christine Bourne and Linda Hannons in their office, they've been really dogmatic in their approach and really helping to find every place where we can find more money. So I have to say that the business office has really been tremendous in helping us to get reimbursement working with this company as well.
All right, and as I look on the documentation, it's 8% of the return up to this amount. So hopefully it's a sizable amount that is getting reimbursed, which is good. All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Hearing, seeing none, we'll go on to number 17, which is an agreement with Southern Connecticut. Ms. Jackson.
Yep, so this is another alternative route for certification program. We just started this. This is what's called the residency program. So it's a residency program that we have with Southern. So this is more geared towards our paraprofessionals. We have a behavioral specialist who's in it. This past year, we've had 7 folks who are part of the program. I am so happy to report that 3 of those folks will be coming through on the upcoming board, and the remaining 4, once they meet the criteria, will also be coming through. So it's really nice. Again, this is a part of our efforts to grow our own program, because unfortunately sometimes our teacher salaries are not competitive enough to bring in special education teachers. And in addition to that, these are folks who have been longstanding employees in New Haven Public School and have a sense of loyalty. So we are confident that they will continue to be loyal employees to New Haven Public Schools, now credentialed and having a career lattice that's going to give them, some certification. So this is for our program. This is where the other program was for cross endorsement for people who were already certified teachers to become special education teachers. This is for people, a pathway. It's giving them a master's degree for folks who are not certified teachers. They will become special education teachers in our district.
All right, thank you. And this was the one I was thinking about when I made my comments earlier about the person I was talking with. Any other comments or questions on this, Dr. Yarbrough?
Yes, just thanks again for creating these strategic opportunities. And thank you for the evaluation data that's here. And I also appreciate in one of the responses, number 12, about it being fiscally sound, just your clarity in talking about possible litigation that can come when we don't have in place what we need. So that helps to clarify the finances of what we're doing. So thank you.
One final thought I'll just throw out there is we did just see at the last board meeting the new recruiting video, maybe a video on that was to come teach in New Haven, maybe one on get certified and then teach in New Haven might be something, highlighting some of the staff members that have used some of these pathways, because I know there's several, including some that we might not even know about, but people that work in the schools that did some of the state alternative routes to certification and then applied. So it might be one of those things where, you know, people that have done these alternative routes might be good to talk with and encourage others to do the same. All right. Hearing nothing else, we'll move on to the purchase orders. And the first one is a purchase order under state contract with Varsity Brands Holding Company Incorporated. Mr. Finelli.
Hey, everybody. So actually, I'm going to talk about number 1, 2, and 3. They're all with BSN. So per the CIC state guidelines, all public schools that have basketball competitions have to have shot clocks installed for competition by November 2023. So we had to act quickly. We did go off the state contract. This company is a company that the AD has dealt with for years. We did get 3 quotes, and they were the lowest quote.
Right, thank you. Comments or questions? Dr. Yarbrough.
Yes, thank you. You answered my question about the quotes, so thank you for that. I'm curious, one, whether we have a local representative who is doing this work, or whether we are flying people in from Tennessee to do this work.
No. So there is a local office, and there are local reps that Eric, the AD, deals with on a weekly and monthly basis. So there are people in the field here.
Okay. Then my other question is whether or not we're overpaying by making this 3 separate bids versus
No, because I
an
did it as 3
individual
separate
bid.
bids because it's 3 separate high schools. But the way it did come in as 1 bid, and they were, I think, about $4,000 less than the other bidder.
Okay, can you explain how it came in as 1 bid?
Well,
What do you
I
mean?
put it. I requested from 3 companies. Just the 3 schools needed the shot clocks, and I had them just price it all as 1. And what I did was I took each line item and separated it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. So I think you answered my question too, which was, I mean, these are listed here under state contract. You mentioned quotes, if I'm understanding correctly. You also did quotes.
Yes,
They're
I did.
also a state contract.
Yep.
And just the thing I was pointing out was I was confused between the 2. So, and that was also with number 4, which is our next item, which is purchase order with Calvert Safe and Lock.
Hang on, Tom, did you have a comment first real quick about BSN?
Mr. Lamb.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Sorry about that. Just remember, when we take items off of state contract, the pricing is locked with that bid. So whether we buy 1 or 50, the price would be the same. Whether we do 1 bid or 10, the pricing is the same as well. So the number of proposals does not impact the cost. If we were to do 5 additional schools with this, the pricing would still be the same, even if it was 1 contract.
Yeah. Dr. Yarbrough.
So per job, so the job is essentially the same in each of our schools?
Correct.
Okay, and so per this type of job, they have 1 pricing that goes along with it?
Correct.
Okay.
And that's pretty much anything that comes off of state contract would be done the same way.
Okay, great. Thank you. That helps me understand.
And this is the purchase of the devices, the shot clock. I don't know if there's 2 of them, 1 for each.
There's 2 for each school, and this is the purchase and installation.
And installation and testing and making sure it works. Okay. Thank you. Now we'll move on to number 4, which is with Calvert Safe and Lock.
So Calvert Safe and Lock is the company that is doing the rekeying at Hill House. This was actually pre-approved by FNO. It's been rather a long lead time to get the items or locks in. So due to the purchasing process to reflect the 23-24 school year, I added it back to FNO for an updated PO.
Got it. Okay. Comments or questions? Dr. Yarbrough.
So just a process question. What happens to the last thing that we previously approved? Because I see coming up, we have some extensions of an end date. So I'm curious why this one is a new contract versus an extension.
I'm not sure how to answer that. I think it's supposed to be an extension.
Or maybe it is. Is it an extension?
Yeah.
Has work occurred on these?
Work has not occurred yet. No, there's nothing has been received. Nothing has been done yet.
So the original PO that was approved last year is dead.
Yes. So I was told I had to close out and we need a new one for the new physical 23-24 year.
Okay.
Okay. I'm seeing Ms. Hannons and Mr. Lamb nodding that, okay, so it's dead. Nothing's gone through it. Nothing can go through it.
Got it. Thank you.
Like it's a new one completely. Got it.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, switch over to the new year always creates fun. Okay, here, nothing else on this. Let's move down to purchase order number 5, which is with McGilla Construction.
So McGill Construction is the construction company that is handling the shades for Brendan Rogers. As everyone knows, we consolidated the 2 buildings into one. And in doing that, we upgraded the pre-K to 3 classrooms by adding new shades, new paint, new electrical outlets, clean the rooms, and just kind of giving them a facelift. And one of the tasks that we were given was the new shades.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? My question was just, it says quotes, and I was just wondering, alternative quotes were sought?
Alternative quotes were sought, and we did the same thing, went off state contract, and they're actually a small business vendor as well.
Okay. Let me just pull open the. Yeah, that's one thing that's also helpful on the cover memo backup for this. You know, quotes is checked, but the state contract number isn't provided, and just, you know, extra information like that
Okay.
is helpful, just so that anybody who wasn't able to be at this meeting,
Can see that.
if they wanted to look at the documentation, they'd get a fuller picture of it.
Okay. Is there a note that they're on small business?
There is not, and let me look. I don't see that as listed either. No. So I just would recommend having that. It's the kind of thing, it might take you a couple extra minutes, but it might save me 10 minutes of discussion in a board meeting. Because somebody
Okay.
that wasn't able to be at this meeting and is looking at the documentation and doing their due diligence won't be able to see it and didn't have the benefit of being here. So
Okay. Duly noted.
thank you, sir. Any other on this item? Then we'll move on to the second, McGilla, which is number 6.
So McGilla is handling the paint, which we were asked to do for these classrooms as well. Again, office, state contract and small business, and we did have 3 quotes from them, and they were the least expensive.
Okay. So same comments apply that I had previous.
Exactly.
Anything else on this one? Hearing, seeing nothing, we'll go on to number 7 with Daleen Hardwood Flooring Company.
So we had a couple schools with requests for flooring. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my notes too. Brendan Rogers. So one of the things, again, we were tasked with upgrading the school was the front entry. The tile was broken. It was a trip hazard. It was rather damaged. So we had that pulled out and a walk-off mat inserted. We went off Daleen's, who's the other state contract. They've done a ton of work with New Havens before. They're very reputable. And for this project, we did not get 3 codes. I just used my background to know that this was, you know, a very good price, and the fact they were on state contract, we knew that nobody else would beat them.
And this particular one is only $3,475.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
All right. Comments or questions?
Frank,
Dr. Yarborough and then Ms. Hannons.
Yes, thank you. I have a couple of questions that just refer to this vendor or this contractor. One is about, would you answer how many quotes did we receive? And I wonder if this is true for the rest of them. So here in this particular item, it is listed as the contractor was selected by quotes. And it's also listed that it's a state contract. But one of my questions is, you know, whether or not a contract, so it seems like this particular contractor has several schools where flooring will be done. And one question is this contractor going to get all this done before school starts? What is our timeline on this? And my other question is, how do you determine, how do you confirm a contractor's capacity when there are multiple small projects simultaneously bid upon versus just one group of contracts?
And that's why we went with them. They're an actually extremely large firm. They're a firm that actually provides the merchandise and installs it. And part of our stipulation in speaking, and we did speak to a couple different companies, we did get pricing, we spoke to a couple different companies. They were able to deliver on our or my timeline to get everything completed before school. So this quote was already given to, I'm sorry, this PO was given to them. The carpet came in and it was installed in a matter of a couple of days. So this particular one is completed.
Okay.
And that helped determine, again, how we chose them because they were able to deliver.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to number 8, which is also with Daleen Flooring, but this is.
And Ms. Hannes has a hand
Oh,
raised.
I'm sorry, Ms. Hannans, my mistake.
Yeah, I might have missed it, but I was concerned. Frank, you're saying that these went through with you're using state contracts? Okay,
Yes.
so just make sure that we put that on there, because as I'm going through the list, I'm going, okay, I can see questions being asked, like we're going, the amounts of money are starting to build up.
Yeah.
They're all coming out of capital, so there are processes that we need to follow. So just make sure that you reference the state contract numbers on these things. So if someone asks.
I'll check on that. Like I said, I work with Selena to do these and upload these for me. I
Right.
know that was provided, but I made a note and I'll make sure
Yeah,
going
because
forward that we always have that.
right, if you're referencing a state contract, it's always good to put that right on the document so there, we can answer questions if we have to in your absence.
Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Lamb?
So for the Delaney flooring, there is the state contract box checked on the memo along with the state contract number.
Yes, I see that.
Okay, so yeah, for this one it is.
So if there's a different place that you'd like us to put that, just let us know and we can certainly do that as well.
You're
I'm
muted.
not seeing that information on this phone, so I normally, if we have a contract, we try to reference that number just to avoid questions.
Okay. Yeah, so it is on the backup information. It does list the state contract number.
Right.
But it's not listing it in the description posted.
Right.
So that's I guess a discrepancy in how we're doing these. So I guess that's something I might request of you, Ms. DeMeo, if you could just take a look at that if we want to center in on standardized wording for these, it might make it easier to reference it in the description as well as making sure the backup documentation lists it.
And for McGilla, I don't know that it's not listed for McGilla, if that is a state contract. So
right, that was what we brought up with McGilla,
right.
But
this other one is here. Yeah.
I mean, I think just overall, Mr. Finelli, for the ones that you were putting through, because there were a couple, I think 1 through 4 didn't. You could just make sure it's listed for all these. And
nope, like I said, I made a note and I apologize. I'm still learning. I'm trying, but yeah, I will make sure going forward it has it.
Got it, Mr. Ma'am.
These will all be listed on the document that goes to the board. All the numbers, so it'll be
the numbers will be listed in the description for that.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. All right, I think that completes number 7, which leaves us with number 8, which is also, I guess it's Delaney.
Yep.
Okay, so it's Delaney hardwood flooring. So this one is.
It's the same situation. Over summer cleaning, we noticed there was a significant damage to this floor at Fairhaven. So again, just in order to get this installed before school starts, we spoke to Delaney. We knew they could get the merchandise in, get it installed, and deliver before August 30th.
Thank you. Comments or questions? All right, we'll go on to number 9, also with Delaney, but this one is Barnard.
So again, same situation. This is a conference room. Barnard had a floor that they caught over the summer during cleaning. Exactly the same thing. We knew that it had to be rectified and replaced. And again, they were able to deliver.
Comments or questions? All right, number 10, also with Delaney, but this one at Conte.
So Conte School, I'm sure everyone knows at this point, had significant damage due to water. We had a very small window to get everything fixed and corrected. We did upgrade the floor from a VCT to an LVT, which costs back on cost going forward, where we don't need to strip or wax anymore. It's actually a hospital grade 20 mil. And again, they were able to get this installed and delivered to us way before our timeline to get the school put back together.
And if I can just, as background, because this is something that I don't think we've discussed at finance and operations, what we discussed at citywide building and stewardship, there was a roof replacement project. The roof was not properly secured during a massive rainstorm. There was damage, and you all have worked, and the contractors have accepted it, and more importantly, their insurance companies have. So this work will be reimbursed, paid
Yes.
for by them.
Yes.
So that is the, and it's not just the work you see here, it's any other damage in the spaces that might go beyond these particular contracts today.
Yeah.
That's the background that I don't know that everybody.
You're very right. It's significant damage. We did have an issue at the beginning getting the construction company to take ownership. We did have to go partner with legal to make sure we did everything properly. Their insurance company did, in fact, take claim of the damage, but to get it done for school opening, we had to pay up front, and we will be reimbursed. And that includes the flooring, the paint, office furniture, desk, and so on.
And that might be worth listing, Ms. DeMayo, on the, I don't know. Why don't you all decide or consider if it's worth listing in the description of these action items as they go to the full board, that this money's to be reimbursed from an insurance settlement or something. I don't know the right way to put it. I'm happy to describe it, but if we, an alternative way, I could say, you know, that these 1, 2, 3, or whatever items are related to that. Mr. Lamb?
I'll work with Attorney Lisiadis to get the appropriate language for that.
Yeah, just the appropriate language, or could all be, alternatively a quick memo. I'm sure other board members will want to, you know, the reassurance that things are being covered and taken care of, and so on. Dr. Yarbrough?
Yes, thank you for the background information. It did bring understanding and clear up some of my questions. One general question is just around some of this work, or all of this work has already been completed, and just how do we get to it being done or started, and us as a board hadn't approved it yet?
This, we're about 90% complete. The paint is done. All the sheetrock work is done. The ceilings are done. The floor will be done tomorrow. Most of the furniture has been delivered, and we have movers coming on Wednesday to build the furniture and put it in the proper places.
Okay. So I think it's a highlight that this is going to be completed before school starts.
Yeah.
And, you know, I also want to balance this with giving the board a heads up, or actually allowing us to approve it before the work begins is preferable. So I don't know how tight the timeline was.
It was extremely tight. We've been doing this over the past 2 weeks, and it's been nerve-wracking to get this completed. So, you know, we did have to work with purchasing on these emergency POs to make sure that we had enough time before the student body came back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the amounts are on the smaller side relatively.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
thank you very much.
Of course.
And I think that's a good point to highlight. This wasn't just school district personnel deciding to do this. This had to, like you were saying, emergency purchase orders, working with City of New Haven Purchasing Department, because you all just can't make those up. You have to work in conjunction with them. And I think you also mentioned legal.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've said before, I'm not able to find a board policy that says work cannot happen. It's just risky. So
Mm-hmm.
it needs to be well justified in order to make sure that you have board support. So you certainly have my support on these.
Thank you.
Agreed.
So I'm trying to remember. That was 10, and now we're on 11.
Yeah.
Or was that 11 and now we're on 12?
10 and 11 kind of, they go the same. They're the same hallway, just the two ends of the hallway, so it's the same thing. Number 12 is the painting company that did the painting at Consi. We went with them because they are our on-call vendor that's very familiar with the school. They have a PO for on-call. They're not state contract, but they're a very reputable paint company. They do a lot of work with Yale and high-end companies. I knew that their pricing would be acceptable. So again, just because we were under a really crunch of a timeline, I made the decision to go with them.
And if I may, we've already approved working with them
We did.
for
Yep.
other
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And this is here as a separate thing because the funding is going to get
Reimbursed.
we need to separate it out to be able to show this for reimbursement purposes. Mr. Lamb?
Also with them, they had the capacity to be able to do this in our timeline, which not everyone else was able to do.
Yeah. Right. But we already had the pre-existing stuff in place.
Yeah.
You're going
Yes.
to be calling on them for a variety of projects through the year
Yeah.
under the
Yeah, and I'll share pictures of stewardship. I could even email pictures. They did a fantastic job. They got so much work done in a matter of 5 days.
Dr. Yarborough?
Yes, just a clarification accuracy question. We did not go out for quotes. Quotes is checked, so maybe we should uncheck it. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a mistake. No, we didn't.
Okay.
We did not have time to.
Okay.
Yeah,
thank you. Again, as you're updating some of these things, I would uncheck the quotes and then explain that this was already approved work. I mean, we've already approved using them. You've already gone through the process of selecting them as an on-call painting vendor. We've approved them. This is just, rather than charging against that, this is to have a separate PO in order to have the reimbursement purposes. A little bit, a sentence or two of explanation would be useful. And I think that's Ms. Hannons.
I just have a few questions because I'm not clear anymore with these contracts that are going through now. Have they been vetted through the city? Are we going to have problems later with just putting these through without following proper procedures?
So according to purchasing procedures, according to Sean Garris, that we are allowed to release POs based up to a certain dollar amount for emergencies.
Okay.
And there was granted POs given to these vendors.
Okay. I just don't want it to come back to haunt us later. I just want to make sure that all of our ducks are in a row. Because it looks like it's a whole list of things now, and I want to avoid questions coming down the road later on.
Again, it is a lot, and it was an emergency situation, but I did work with Sean and Mike Gormley and Christine Bourne. So yeah.
Okay, and you do have something in writing to back up these purchases.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Nothing else on this. Then we'll move on to number 13, which is a purchase order with Daikin Applied Americas.
Yeah, Tom and I discussed this. I think that's a mistake. That shouldn't have been on there. So we could, you guys already approved that a while ago. We could just skip over that.
Okay, so this is being withdrawn?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so it shall be withdrawn, and when I move it forward, I might need a reminder, Dr. Yarborough, if I forget that it is for 12 purchase orders, not 13.
Yes.
All right. Move into contracts. First one, D1, is with pre-construction.
So we were told early summer that Edgewood is receiving a kindergartner this year that is in a motorized wheelchair. The principal brought to our attention that he would not be able to get into the nurses station, which is on the lower level from the playground. We know nurses stations are usually somewhere adjacent to the main office, but at Edgewood, their nurses station is in the basement. So with concern, we partnered with our engineer firm to design a new door and a handicap ramp to get him into the nurses stations, God forbid. So this did go out to bid on Bonfire, and pre-construction came in as the lowest bidder.
All right, thank you. Comments or questions? All right, thank you. We'll move on to number 2, which is with Trio Community Meals order contract. So, Mr. Young?
Good afternoon. These items here are for our unitized breakfast that we will be serving out to our students.
All right. And so unitized breakfast, that's just the, like a
packet, provide.
packet with the
Yes.
items. All right, thank you. And these all go out to bid and are awarded through the
Yes, sir.
process. All right, Dr. Yarbrough?
Yes, thank you. Curious for the documentation, why the increase, seemingly significant increase from 2.5 or from 1.7 million to 2.5 million between last year and this year, unless it says 2023 is forecasted to be $1.7 million. So I don't know if it came in actually higher.
Mr. Lamb?
So I had a conversation with Mr. Gormany about this earlier today, and the way that he described it to me is there's 2 things that are impacting the increase. One is that the unit costs did have an increase, so that elevated the overall contract cost, but also the number of units being distributed is another factor that's raising the costs. When the unit values are estimated at the beginning of the school year, in many cases, those need to be estimated, and there's over the last several years we've seen an increase. Mr. Gormany is available to be brought into the conversation. If someone can bring him in, he can provide a more detailed explanation.
That'd be fine with me. Mr. Gormany, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Lamb. Good afternoon, Dr. Yarbrough. So I was listening. To answer your question, Mr. Lamb is spot on. We basically had a conversation. What we try to do when we provide these documents is give a historical overview, but as Mr. Lamb said, the historical overview is basically estimated. It depends on the number of meals that we've served that year. So for example, if you actually look at the document in the previous year, we did 2.2 million in actual costs related to unitized breakfast. We did see an increase in pricing by about 3 to 5%. This is a contract where it's based on individual items that are brought that make up these unitized meals. So as Mr. Lamb mentioned, this is really an estimate, especially if we see an increase in the number of meals that are served. Obviously, enrollment, beginning of the year, end of the year, all of that plays a part in what we actually spend in this contract. But because we did see about a 3 to 5% increase, depending on the actual items that we're using, we did feel that increasing the overall base of the contract was the right way to go. As another context, again, everything at the beginning of the year is estimated. So even in the forecasted number for fiscal year 23, we initially set up the contract at 2.2 million based on what we were seeing. So again, it's really depending on how we're flowing during the fiscal year will dictate what we spend during the year. But I certainly understand your concern on increasing the actual price. But again, sometimes with food service, the actual cost is a little deceiving because it depends on the number of meals that are served in any particular year.
Understood. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Hearing nothing else on this, we'll move on to number 3, which is a contract with Reliable Refrigeration Plus.
So, Mr. Wilcox and Dr. Yarborough, we're gonna ask that this item actually be removed from this agenda. This was actually an error. You know, we did go out to bid for on-call refrigeration, but at the last minute, one of the vendors posed a question to purchasing that they were looking into. Unfortunately, I just got back from vacation mid last week, so I haven't had a chance to look into if this question was answered or not, from the procurement standpoint. So before we award the contract, I just want to make sure everything's all lined up, from a vendor standpoint with this item.
Right, that sounds good. So this is being withdrawn.
Yes.
Dr. Yarbo, you had a question?
Yes. So timing wise, can the next one get approved before the service will begin? Do we have enough time in terms of our F&O meetings and then the actual board meeting?
In the next week, are you asking if we can have the updated information?
Well, before we would actually utilize this service.
So, I do not believe, and Mr. Young can correct me, if we've had any repairs done yet to any of our on-call refrigeration equipment
No.
within the schools. Unfortunately, what this did pose is we did have a period during the summertime that we would normally have them look at our equipment. So I am going to try to have purchasing answer this question right away so we can absolutely have the documentation to F&O for approval in a timely manner at the next meeting. If any equipment or anything does come up, we'll have to take a look at what the actual repairs and the cost are related to that equipment. But right now, the equipment's not really in use. Just a few here and there because of summer programs, but we're gonna get this issue resolved right away.
Mr. Wilcox, I was just wondering whether we should leave it on and pull it before or at the board meeting if necessary. I don't know which one would be, just so we can avoid kind of starting work without an approval.
I see what you're saying. So the suggestion is if we leave it, because we've heard the explanation, it sounds like there's just a clarification. We could move it forward with the idea that it could always be removed from the board agenda. But
So,
gone through this committee, I'm happy to do either.
So Mr. Wilcox and Dr. Yarbo, I just remember something. If I can give just a little bit more context to this, if it will help in your decision, that may work. So the issue is, it's either going to be awarded to Reliable or our current incumbent vendor Precision. It was ironic that both submitted the same hourly rate for this in their proposals. What we're looking at is paperwork clarification. So it will either be awarded to Reliable or our incumbent Precision. The contract amount that's listed within this item agenda will not actually may not actually change depending on paperwork clarification.
But it
So
might.
I mean it could, but what I can do is I can certainly work with procurement and try to get this resolved this week, if that helps.
So if I could pose a hypothetical to you, let's just say we don't send it forward, the board doesn't approve it. You all need some on-call refrigeration or oven and steam repairs in order to be ready for school. And then we have questions sometimes. We in the past, and I've gone through meeting agendas, the board has on many occasions approved contracts to like July 1, but we've approved them in early August. A lot of it is, the total amount that's happening around this fiscal year. And personally, I don't see a huge issue with this, with the exception of this could be risky because work done without an approved contract from the board and the district's not allowed to enter into those contracts. But provided that the board approves it, 4 of the adult members approve it, I don't see that's an issue. I just say it's risky and so it should be avoided when it can be.
I
So-
think myself and Mr. Young, Mr. Wilcox will certainly take a look at that, but as Mr. Young said, to date, we haven't had any work done this fiscal year, so holding it off, until the next board meeting, hopefully we won't anticipate any work or any emergency services being needed. But you're absolutely correct. Something could come up where we need to have an on-call vendor.
Okay. So I'm just wondering if I'm correct in my assumption that we're not in, from my look, we're not in violation of board policy on this, but it is still risky behavior that should be avoided because it creates possibility for problems to happen. I'm just wondering, am I in
No, I think you're correct. And again, I think I can certainly work with procurement. I did email him during this call, which he got back to me. Mr. Garris got back to me, so I think we can have this issue resolved right away this week, and I can email Tom the overall results of so that way it can be communicated to yourself, Mr. Yarborough, and the rest of finance and operations on the result of what we have.
okay, so we are or not sending it through today? I'm happy to wait until the next meeting and make sure everything is perfectly in place myself.
If you do approve it today, I think there has to be a caveat that the vendor themselves could possibly change. From
That's a
reliable
major,
to
that's a
precision. I
major
think that's
change.
a major change
Okay.
to the agenda item. So I would say the next meeting should suffice.
Okay.
Yeah, and I wouldn't change the vendor. Like I wouldn't try to, yes, I would just pull that contract off the agenda for the board. But I'm perfectly fine. I do agree that it's okay to wait, since it seems like we're not expecting to utilize the service before the beginning of the school year.
Yeah, and as I've said, and I can show the documentation, and they're just listed as action items on board meeting agendas. We have many things through the year that are for, like, approving things in August for a July 1 start date.
Mm-hmm.
We sometimes see it approving things in like February 1 for things that started a little bit before, in January with coming back after the break for after school programs and things. And I do try to remind everybody that's problematic, but it's yeah.
Thank you.
So it's certainly been past practice, should be avoided, so that it's done absolutely minimally and for good reason. All right. Okay, so we'll pull that item for this meeting and we'll move on to the change orders. The first one is with change order number 2 with contract with Thurston Foods. So Mr. Gormany or Mr. Young?
Yeah, so this was a change order for the previous year's contract. Unfortunately, and I will take a bulk of the blame for this one being submitted late, that we were reconciling the invoices for the previous contract, some invoices that came in for the month of June. Unfortunately, we did submit this item late. We did submit this item late to F&O once we found these batches of invoices that we had to pay related to last year's contract. So that's kind of that's why we were submitting this change order.
So it's the original number is based on, is an estimate I think you mentioned this earlier, if I'm correct, these are based on estimates. And then once you get the final bills, then
Yes,
you see what
correct.
the actual costs are.
Yes, I'm sorry about that. Yes. So it's right. All our contracts, just for context, all our contracts for food service, most of the food contracts are really estimates during the year. Obviously, it depends on the menu items being served during the year, that Mr. Young and his team would develop. So sometimes in contracts, we see products being utilized more than anticipated or less than anticipated than we've seen in the beginning of the year. In this case, Thurston is our main grocery provider. So we did end up seeing more utilization in some of their products and requesting food products than we anticipated during the year when we initially did the contract award amount. Now, we did do a change order in March when we did look at anticipating cost from March to June, but again, that was estimated cost as we don't know every single exact menu item or if something is going to be utilized more during the year. So normally in July, what food service does is we get statements and other things to see what's outstanding with vendors for the year, to see if we need to submit a change order timely to F&O for the previous contract. Again, this was an error on my part. The food service staff, administrative staff did do some of that work, but I was a little late myself in reconciling some of this particular statement for this vendor.
Thank Mr. Lamb.
Also remember that earlier in the year, we had a significant supply chain issue and had to do many substitutions on our menu. And a lot of those items had different unit costs that impacted the projections for the year as well.
Sure.
And a lot of those, as Mr. Gormley stated, came out during the reconciliation of the account at the end of the year.
So again, normally, thank you, Mr. Lamb. So normally we do try to submit any of our final change orders, which you've seen, in June or the beginning of July towards the previous year. But this one, unfortunately, was, no excuses. It was just late on my part.
Any other comments on this? Dr. Yarbrough?
Yes, thank you for the explanation and walkthrough. I think I would like to see an updated finance sheet for food services, because sometimes we end the year, or maybe last year we ended the year with a surplus. So I'm curious where we stand now.
Yeah, and I think we have on our schedule, we have periodic updates on the food service budget. And I'm trying to remember when we have one. I think we typically do it in October.
I believe, Mr. Wilcox, we committed about a couple of years ago to every quarter. So it should be probably coming up in September-ish, somewhere around there, or October on final closeout of the number.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll confirm on the schedule that it's on the schedule. And yes. Thank you. Anything else? All right. We have two more change orders, both with ProMech Incorporated. Mr. Finelli.
So Promec is the company that is doing the Martinez pool. This was approved back in March. We did not receive the PO until May 2nd. Once Promec received the PO, it was a 30-week lead time to get the dehumidification system. So maybe Ms. Hannah, I don't know if you could help with this. This isn't necessarily a change order. We're almost doing for the purchasing policy, closing out the current PO and opening up a new PO for this year. We did spend against the old PO because they did do some work already. And this is the remainder of that PO going on to the 23-24 year.
Okay. Yes, what happened was that because we're closing the fiscal year, we can't have open purchase orders. What we did was, my recommendation was that we close the old purchase order pay what we could in the last fiscal year. And then because this is our ESSER funds, which roll over, the balance of the purchase orders would then go against this fiscal year to pay them off. You know, the ESSER grant was what, 5 years. So it's just rolling over the work that is not done.
Okay.
Yeah. One thing though, Frank, on the second one, the account number should be the same as the first account number. Yeah, it should be 6399. I think you have 6398.
Oh, I'll correct that. Yes, I just did that now.
Yeah, they
Okay.
should all be the same account number.
Okay.
Okay.
I think
So-
we may have to change the wording a little bit though to I guess to explain more of what we are doing. Because I think when we get audited with on the federal level, they might think that we did something. So I would just maybe add a little bit more meat to the to what we're actually doing.
Okay.
Okay, and I can help you with that.
Thank you. Okay.
So we don't hold it up.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that in the wording that this is,
Yeah,
we often use the wording without a, you know, that this is the work, but it's for no change in the, like when we're changing an account number, we would say with no change
In
in
scope.
in the amount, something that shows that this is not. And so my question is also the alders, that this is not a multi-year, a true multi-year. This is just bridging a fiscal year. The work
Right.
is less than a year.
right.
The
To
amounts,
continue.
the alders would have already seen these based on the amounts.
Right.
My question was just, do they see this again? Does this go back before them?
No,
Be-
this is more technical within our grants, within the federal grants. Once we do the contracts and everything, we have like I think it's like almost 120 days to liquidate the obligations, and in some cases we have more than that. So all we're doing is we knew we couldn't finish this work within this fiscal year, and like I said, we can't have an open encumbrance, so we had to close the encumbrance and then reopen it in the next fiscal year.
Okay, Mr. Lamb?
So even with these two contracts, they were awarded by bid, so there would not be a requirement for them to go to the Board of Alders, and the lengthening of the contract does not exceed 12 months within either crossing a fiscal year or within a calendar year. So therefore, it would not need to go to Board of Alders either.
Okay. It wouldn't hurt to have a memo on these, just to say what this is, or it's just a thought. Just to make it really clear that this is, you know, and I'm not suggesting a very lengthy one, but just a
Details. Yep. I got it.
yeah, a paragraph that explains that this is what happens, and that we had to close out the one PO and the next, but the total cost is not going to exceed what was previously approved. Dr. Yarbrough?
Yes, I'm in favor of the clarification, so thank you for that. The extension, if I'm reading this correctly, does extend beyond 12 months. If the start date is 4/23/2023 and the contract term new end date is 6/2024.
Okay.
It's like
So
14 months. So just if something needs to happen to make it 12 months or less,
Yeah, we could change that.
what we have here is a full year, or a full year and 2 months. My question is two questions. One, what stage are we at with this project, and will it be completed soon such that we can?
So per
Use
the
the pool?
contract, we did have the room fully abated, cleaned, and it has been painted. The ductwork has been taken down. The system has been fully decommissioned. So I would say we're probably about 25 to 30% there. We're waiting for the system to come in. The system is due in sometime beginning of November. And I would say install is anywhere from 4 to 5 weeks. So we feel this job will be done by sometime mid to the end of December.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
And we
you.
could change that date to reflect that to show.
So that might change into a February 1, 2024 date, something like that, just to give some
Yeah,
wiggle.
just to cover us maybe. Yeah, God forbid there's an issue with delivery.
Thank you.
And is that it's the same issue as with the boilers?
With the boilers are the lead time was nowhere near as far. The lead time was about 20 weeks. That PO went out originally, I think, in May. I spoke to Hamilton. The boilers are due in start doing the week of September 10th. And again, I would say 4 to 5 weeks to start up and commissioning. So I'm pretty confident we'll have those up and running sometime in October.
Okay. Would you like to adjust the date now?
Yeah, we could do that. I would say, again, just to cover ourselves, maybe put December 1st.
That works for me. So I'm hearing December 1st for number 3 and maybe
February 1st for or say February 20th, the last day of February 28th for number 2.
okay, so February 28th, 2024 for number 2. December 1st, 2023 for
Yes.
number. All right, when I move those items, I'm up with the change in the
Okay.
Dr. Yarbrough.
Yes, for number 3, the boiler, the award amount listed is 608,000. So the same as.
It's been corrected.
Oh, it has been
online. It was a typo. The proper amount for number 3 is 665,765.
Yes.
It was on the documentation. It wasn't listed correctly on the list, but it's been corrected on the website.
Okay. When I open the PDF online, it's still listed as 608,000. In terms of the
I see what you're talking about.
extra
Sure.
information. Okay.
We can make sure that correction is made.
Yeah. That's weird because when I open it here, it says 665,000.
Really? So maybe I have to refresh something.
Refresh. So the 608 is the Martinez pool, and the 665 is the boiler.
Okay. Yes, Dr. Yarbrough.
Last question. It may be unrelated to this, but over the summer we were paying for rental of subsystems, and it may be related to AC and not heat. But if it is related to these items here, are we able to stop the rental of the AC?
There's nothing related to either one of these schools as far as the rental.
Okay, for that? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Projects.
Right.
Ms. Hannes has a hand raised. Mr.
Yeah.
Wilcox.
I'm sorry. I just would like to recommend, Frank, that if it at all possible, because we previously encumbered these funds in the ESSER for the previous fiscal year, that we give priority to moving these, the work on these projects so that we're not going into another fiscal year using ESSER funds and projects still have not been completed. So if all possible, can we keep these on the forefront and push the vendors to get this work done? It would be great.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it would be great if we could have everything done by December. Because we are going to report out, we are going to have to report out where we are. And if we are, if we need another extension. So I would like to have all the work that we said we were going to do done. So if at all possible, if we could move some of these projects that are using ESSER funds with, I'll be a happy camper.
So I'm 99% sure they both will be done by the end of the year.
Okay.
But I asked Mr. Wilcox to just write down February 1st. That's just to cover, just in case we have an issue upon delivery, because we can't control anything until we receive it. I am tracking it, the 30 weeks. As of right now, it is showing it being delivered on the first week of November. So as long as that's in the first week of November, I don't see an issue where we won't have everything up and started by the end of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Lamb.
Linda, with longer lead items, especially mechanical systems, it's very hard to guarantee that vendors will meet those dates without some shift. So we just need to keep that in mind, especially with the larger systems. We'll do the best we can to pressure the vendors to get everything in, but with those longer lead times, it's very hard for us to manage those, because there's a level of uncertainty that comes with, especially when we're looking at lead times of 20 plus weeks.
I understand that, Tom, but I'm just saying in terms of, because of the fact that these are ESSER funds, that and we're in the last year of these funds as well, I think that we need to start looking at, I don't want someone coming back and say, well, you know, New Haven, you had this money for 3 years and it, you know, I just want to make sure that we, by time we close, that we have done the work that we needed to do.
Absolutely.
That's my only concern. I don't want any, you know, things to come back to haunt us later, is why did it take us so long when it was in the original application?
Totally understand.
Thank you.
All right, hearing the end of this, we'll go ahead and move these items, noting that purchase order 13 and contract 3 were withdrawn for now. So we'll move that we send to the board with a recommendation to approve the 17 agreements, 12 purchase orders, 2 contracts, and 3 change orders.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? I think we've already discussed it individually. So we'll go ahead and vote. Dr. Yarborough?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So those will move on. We'll move into our discussion items. The first thing is a small contractor development update. Mr. Lamb or others, please,
So
you have the floor.
thank you very much. So Lil Schneider is in the participants, if she could be moved over.
She is listed here on my screen, so she's in.
Oh. So in a second, I'll turn this over to Lil, but Lil and the facilities team have been working very closely over the last 12 months to increase our awareness of her program and how it is utilized in the district, as well as to try to make better use of her program to engage with local vendors. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lil, who will give kind of a update of where the program is and how it is being utilized by the district.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lil Snyder. I'm the manager of the Small Contractor Development Program, which is a division of economic development. We also work very closely with procurement because of the provisions in the ordinance which require the utilization of local small minority contractors. With that said, there's an awful lot to understanding the program. And I want to remind everyone that I am available at any time to either take a phone call, virtually meet with individuals of the committee, or with groups, because there is a lot to understand. And the city has been very committed to the use of local small contractors. As Tom said, I work very closely, which is a very welcoming approach with Tom and Frank and Heather, with a lot of interaction and a lot of understanding what the program requires. And I usually try to kick off at the beginning of every fiscal year a meeting with the major committees to understand what the program really requires. Because there ends up being a lot of misinformation. You know how things, all of a sudden somebody thinks or says something and everybody believes it to be regulations. And I have to be the bad guy and go around and tell every department head, no, you're doing it wrong. Or as Linda said a couple of times, you want to make sure that you don't have somebody coming after you and saying we did this wrong or you didn't follow the right procurement process. And so, as I said, it's a very welcoming change to be able to work with a department that calls. Frank will call me up and say, Lil, I'm thinking of doing this. Am I going in the right direction? Or do you have any suggestions on how we can utilize some of the contractors in the program? The program is a small minority contractor program for New Haven County. In order for us to be legal, we are, our focus, or let's say our focal group is New Haven County. Years ago, I mean, those of you who go back as far as I do remember that the city of New Haven went to court being challenged in having a program that wasn't legal. And part of that reason was because we did not have a clear definition of who our local contractors are, did we have them, and where were they located. So our program is for New Haven County. And we work very closely in identifying real legitimate contractors. We have a database which is posted on our website of virtually, I'd say probably, I think 130, 140 contractors. They're not suppliers, they're actual trade contractors, and they're small. All their gross receipts, which is one of the requirements from the alders when we posted this, was that their gross receipts are under $3 million. They're located in New Haven County, and they have been in business for at least 6 months, and that they self-perform the work. One of the things over the years we found was that, you'd have a contractor, a vendor who bids the work, and then he doesn't actually perform the work. He hires somebody else to do the work, and that defeats the whole purpose of our program. Our program is to make sure that all our city departments offer opportunities. It's so much easier to have one contractor come in and do all the work. And then, I come along and say, okay, this $1 million contract, why don't you break it up into 4 contracts of, $250,000, allowing some more smaller contractors to have an opportunity to bid on this. It's more paperwork, it's more management, it's more reporting, but that is how we get our small contractors to learn, to be able to work with the Board of Education. Even if they don't get the bid, they submitted a bid and figure out why they did not get it. But then we know that they exist. We know that Tom's office and Frank know that this is a viable company, and we could get a quote from them. We also have a sheltered market. So, and that's my involvement with procurement. The ordinance says that when you go out to bid, if your bid is under, if your estimated budget is under $150,000, it has to be bid only to the contractors registered in the program, which gives our contractors an opportunity to bid with small guys like themselves and not with the big guys. Most of the time, the big guys will will present a better bid. So we said, let's bid with like kind. So when Frank and Heather are looking at bids, they have to know that if the budget is under $150,000, it has to be bid only to our contractors. If the bid is over $150,000, they have to offer subcontracting opportunities. So when you're looking at one of your contracts that's $500,000, before that contract is executed, purchasing sends it over to me and says, Lil, contact the prime contractor and see what he can subcontract. See what opportunities are there for our small contractors to get a piece of the pie. And I call them up and send them letters and meet with them to make sure that there are opportunities that are being offered. And nobody likes it because it's a pain. It's extra work, but however, that's the only way we have found, and I do have to say, we have out of the limited amount of programs like ours in the state, because there's only 3, we happen to be the strictest. We happen to make sure that it's trade contractors, like I said before, it's real work on the contract, and I monitor that. I make sure that when Reliable Refrigeration says that they're going to subcontract to John Smith for $50,000, I call up John Smith and say, is your contract for $50,000? And when are you going to do this work? Because in the beginning, when we started, I do these phone calls and they'd say, what? A $20,000 contract? I thought it was $2,000. And meanwhile, without that monitoring, all good intentions are put aside, because at the end of the day, if you don't enforce, all our good efforts are for naught. So we not only do we have the requirement, but I am a strict enforcer of the program. I make sure that what they say they're going to subcontract, they're really going to do. And then when they say they're going to do the work, they're actually out there doing the work. Our definition in New Haven of MBE, and I'm just hitting the highlights because I know it's late and everybody's tired, and I am available. So please do not hesitate to call me up with any questions that you have. But our definition in New Haven of MBE is Black and brown. Women have their own category, and it has been a problem for a long time, an issue with the state. The state has a definition of MBE that includes at least 20 different subcontractors or 20 different trades. So in our case, when you see a report from me that says MBE participation, you know that it is Black and brown contractors, and it's a separate category for women. We encourage women to work on our jobs. We have a goal to have women work on our jobs, but we don't mix them with the MBE definition. I can't tell you how many times over the years I've seen projects where they come in and they'll say, oh, Lil, we did a great job. We have 32% MBE participation and 29% are white women. And so that defeats the whole purpose. So that is why in our regulations, we separated them. We're the only entity in the state that does that. So when you're looking at Hartford, or when you're looking at Waterbury or Bridgeport, and they say, oh, look at how wonderful our numbers are, the question is, pull out the women category, and then you'll see what their real MBE participation number is. But as I said, we're the only entity in the state that does that. And so working with facilities and working, as I said, with Tom and Frank and Heather, we have been able to have a wonderful MBE participation number. The opportunities are there. If they don't bid, that's nothing that we can say is a problem from us. We also have a shortage of qualified trade contractors throughout the country. And that's a whole nother issue that I'm working on. But the opportunities are there. I make sure that the opportunities are there everywhere that it's possible. And then our office, when I get the information from Frank that says we're going to bid painting at Conti School, I do an email blast. It goes directly to 130 of our contractors, right into their email, and then we do a text follow-up so that they don't miss it. Due date is going to be, September 2nd. Reminder, here's a painting opportunity. Here's a great opportunity for you to bid. You may not always get it because there is a lot of confusion as to, do we give out work? We are a public entity. We cannot give out work. It has to be quotes. It has to be competitive bidding. So if you do give a quote and your quote is outrageously high, what we offer is that let's sit down and look at your quote as to why it is so high, which is an amazing learning experience. Maybe you bid 25% profit and overhead, whereas the rest of the economy is doing 2 or 3%. And so the program isn't just a paper reporting on how good or bad somebody is working. It is an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to grow, and it's an opportunity to build capacity. And so putting that all together, eventually we should be able to increase the number of MBE contractors that we currently have available in New Haven County, because the number after COVID, the numbers just dwindled down because of people not returning to the construction industry, because of the crazy prices in the construction industry. So it's a challenge right now. All of us who are working in this, it is a challenge. But you step up and you meet the challenge. And as I said, there's a lot to the program. Tom and Frank, they have to comply with the regulations. I make sure that they know that this is a project that's under 150,000 and they have to bid it to our contractors, our registered contractors. We're constantly trying to increase the number of contractors in our program. So if you happen in your travels, a contractor comes up and says, I want to bid on city work, tell them to give me a call, because a lot of times they don't understand how to get city work or where to even look. So I'm available. I always have a lot to talk about our program, but as I said, don't hesitate to give me a call. And when I finish this year's, because I'm just starting to work on the participation and the results for fiscal year 23. Once I have all the numbers in from finance, I'll share with the committee and with Tom the actual participation for the last fiscal year, but it has been very good. Overall, because of the program and our focus on participation, our New Haven-based businesses, our actual principal place of business, New Haven place businesses have been doing very well as our minority businesses. We have a couple of contractors who are going to graduate from the program because they've been bidding. They started out small. They got awarded $1 million sidewalk contract. And so pretty soon they're going to be out of the program, which is great. Then they're in another level, but that's really what we want to do. Our goal is to increase capacity. Our goal is to get the contractors out of our assistance program. But, some of them are happy being in the program. They don't want to get any bigger. They say, we like what you have to offer. We like that we get emails directly into our email. We don't have to look in the paper for a job. We know that whatever the Board of Ed, engineering, City of New Haven's bidding, Lil, you're going to get it to us. And that is a big asset to our small contractors. You work all day having to come home at night and then look for where your next job is very taxing. And that's one of the perks that we offer when you're registered in our program. But I may have taken up enough time, but please do not hesitate, to give me a call, for clarification or additional information, or if you have a contractor who you think can sign up with us. Any questions?
All right, thank you. Comments or questions from the committee? Dr. Yarborough.
Yes, Ms. Snyder, thank you very much. I appreciate your walkthrough. I've learned a lot, and I did not know how it worked. So thank you very much. One question, which is the interaction So for a bid or a project under the 150, the interaction between minority small contracts and state approved contractors as it relates to pricing. I know sometimes we choose state contractors, but it's a small enough price that maybe it could go to a small minority small business contractor.
I, as a rule, and Frank will call me and ask what I think. As a rule, I prefer not to use the state contract because not all our small contractors are registered on the state contracting list. I rather that you offer if there's time, and a lot of times what has happened is that it's a crunch. The principal says, I have 3 weeks and I just noticed that the ceiling's falling down and I need it fixed right away. And we can't go through the procurement process in an expeditious time manner. But normally what I say is give us the opportunity for the contractors registered in our program to bid first. And so as long as we have time to do that, that's the direction I like to go in. Several of our contractors are on the state bid list, but they're the ones more experienced. The newer guys coming in, paperwork, as you know, when you're just listening to all the paperwork you guys have to go through, it's a nightmare. And dealing with public work paperwork is ridiculous. It is just so much. So the newer contractors are afraid to, everybody has to have a SAMS registration now. Everybody has to have DAS certification, lots and lots of paperwork. And our program does offer back office that reason to help them with these applications. And so, to go, as I said, I can talk a lot about the program for a long time. But the quick answer is I prefer that you start with our guys and see if they can quickly give you a turnaround time. But if you are under a time constraint, going with the state contract is your best bet.
Thank you so very much.
All right, I'll just say, I think this is the second or third time I've heard Ms. Snyder explain the program. I learn a little bit more each and every time. So I do appreciate that. You've already answered my one question, which was when you have the data from this last year completed, you'll forward it on to us so we can see that. That's what we've seen in the past, and it is interesting to see the data that goes with the description. So
it is. I do, for the city spend, I do a monthly report because that's really what you want to see. How well is the program doing? And it's also helps me find out, because I am the enforcer. So it helps me find out how the different departments are doing, because they will try to sneak in contracts without going through the program. And so it's 30 days later, but I do eventually, it's sort of, as I said, I'm the enforcer of city procurement for the program. So I will eventually see every department spend and who they've hired and the designation. And I have no problems in calling them up and saying, Public Works, we have landscaping contractors. Why didn't you run this bid through the SCD program? And they give you a sad story about how, they needed to hurry up and do this and how this was a friend. And I'm sorry, we have nothing to do with friends. You need to go through the process, make sure that you offer it. I mean, sometimes we don't have the contractors who do a particular type of work, but the regulations and the ordinance say that you go through us first, you offer it to our small contractors first. And if we don't happen to have a specialty contractor who does granite paving, then we have it in an email that says that we do not have someone who does this work.
all right, thank you. Mr. Lamb?
So thank you, Lil. Always a pleasure talking with you. You're a wealth of knowledge.
And just so you know, I mean, a couple of over the years, as I said, I'd like to come to the major players and go over the program because I've been doing it for so long. And it's a great way for everybody to realize what we in New Haven are doing because we are unique. There isn't another entity in the state that does what we do for small contractors.
So we have had a lot of very good experiences with her program. One of the areas where, sometimes things happen and we go through her for a bid and there's no bidder, then we have to put it out to bid for open for public bid. So sometimes that'll take the length of time and kind of stretch it. And those are things that are kind of out of our control. So it's good, and sometimes it's challenging.
It is, and that's what we all understand from, if we are committed to a program like ours, sometimes it costs a little more, sometimes it takes a little more time, but the end result is that we have contractors who have grown, who would have never had an opportunity if it wasn't for a program like ours. Most department heads don't want to work with a program like ours. And so luckily, Frank and Tom have been very cooperative. At first, I was weary whether they would want to work with us, but as I said, I was pleasantly surprised that they understood where we, as the city, are coming from in trying to grow and develop our small contractors.
Mr.
Frank?
Finelli.
No, I just want to comment on like we have made amazing relationships with a couple of the contractors. We found really strong, talented contractors. And coming on board with New Haven a year ago, I wasn't familiar with the program, and I might have been a little leery, but now I partnered with Lil. You see the effect of it, how amazing it is, and we see the work and the quality that these contractors have been able to provide for us. So it's been a great partnership and relationship.
But as I said, it's not easy. We have to be committed, and we have to understand that sometimes it takes a little longer. And when you have the bosses, the principals of the school, the teachers calling you up and saying, I want this done tomorrow, and thinking that you could just pick up the phone and call somebody and say, come and do this tomorrow. No, we can't. But then that's how we grow, and that's our whole focus.
But in a case where Brennan and we had to move extremely quickly, we partnered with McGilla, who was on small business, and they have been wonderful, and they delivered, and they were on property with us in like 48 hours. So this program for those kind of situations has been a blessing.
But yeah, and as I said, please, if you have any questions, because there's always, some naysayer, there's always someone who's not happy, there's always someone who's complaining. Never hesitate to give me a call, because I'll give you a true, honest answer on, where we are and what we're doing.
All right, thank you. So similar to what we heard about earlier today about growing our own in terms of teacher certification and special education certifications for teachers. It's also the city's doing the same with contractors and so on. So I appreciate that. And as always, it's a pleasure to hear from you, Ms. Snyder.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate the time, because I know everybody's had a long day.
Well, you'll have time with us every year if you want it.
Thank you. Well, don't take me, I'll take you up on that.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. You too.
All right. So it is getting a little bit late, but we do have a few more things on this agenda. The next one is a transportation grant update.
So thank you. I'm going to sort of like set the stage, and then I'm going to be inviting Mr. Lamb and maybe Dr. Finley to chime in if needed. But in response to some of the inquiries related to the bus electrification grant opportunity, I had asked the team to go back and take a look at some of the details within that particular grant opportunities. And there was a group of folks who came together to do so. So that team was made up of Mr. Lamb, also Dr. Finley. We invited Teddy Berra and Lachelle Roundtree from our transportation department to weigh in, as well as individuals from First Student, because that is who we utilize at this point. So we had information gathered from the regional manager, Mr. Vinny Capiello, also the First Student Bus Electrification Division, Kevin Matthews, as well as the First Student Regional Manager, Mr. Paul DeMeo, and the First Student Legal Team. We also invited our own corporation counsel to weigh in, as well as the city engineer, Mr. Giovanni Sin. So I had asked, again, Mr. Lamb to gather all the information that surfaced from engaging all of those individuals. And we do have information that we want to share with you today.
So thank you very much. And I will share my screen real quick. Just got a couple slides that I'm going to throw up on the screen. So as Dr. Negron mentioned, we have been engaged with a number of stakeholders to review the bus electrification grant opportunity over the last several months, specifically since the RFP for the transportation services for the district went out for bid, going back that far. Once the RFP for the grant was, the RFP for the transportation services was no longer possible, and we had to move toward a one-year contract with First Student. That changed the direction of our conversations, because we were now no longer in a long-term commitment, but we were in a one-year commitment with First Student. So it changed how First Student and our team looked at the long-term planning for bus electrification and the submission for the grant. In working with First Student, there was a period of time where we were kind of stalled because of the RFP and the contract process with the city of New Haven. So we did not really pick up speed on conversations and developing the needed information for the grant until after the contract was awarded, the one-year agreement for the First Student contract extension was completed. That put us a little bit behind in looking at exactly what was required for the grant. And in doing that, working with this group, we created a kind of a list of barriers to completing this application process, both for us as the City of New Haven Public Schools applying for the grant, and for First Student to apply for this grant. Some of the general barriers to application are pretty straightforward. All of the buses that we currently have are owned by First Student. We do not own any of our buses. So as part of the grant application process, the vehicles would have to ultimately be owned and operated by First Student. First Student does not own their bus yard, and that presents a significant barrier to the infrastructure that's needed to be able to charge the buses, and also provides a barrier to long-term planning. So this grant is, and you're going to see that in the next slide, but round 2 of 5 potential grant opportunities that are being put out by the federal government. So there are several other grant opportunities for us, as well as some additional grant opportunities coming from the state of Connecticut. So in conversations with First Student related to infrastructure, we wanted to make sure that the infrastructure that we were putting in place was not only going to be for what we would be utilizing now, but also what we would be utilizing in the future. And if First Student was to not receive the contract or the award for a new multi-year contract, Um, the buses that we would receive through the grant are non-transferable for a period of at least 5 years. So that in and of itself created another additional barrier where if we had long-term planning in place um, as part of the RFP process in a multi-year contract, there would be more stability in the infrastructure that we would be putting in place. As it currently stands in our one-year contract, there's a significant level of uncertainty, not only with the ownership of the buses long term, but also with the position of our um, with the position of uh, the I'm sorry, excuse me, with the position of the infrastructure um, becoming uh, owned and on a property that is not only owned by a third party, but owned by a third party that is not our busing provider. So one of the questions that we had to ask if First Student was to apply, um, NHPS does not have the capacity to own and operate our own buses within the district. We do not have a yard, we do not have the staff, and we do not have the ability to be able to manage a bus operation that includes safety inspections that are required by the state. It includes all of the maintenance capacity for um, uh, vehicles. And again, because these vehicles are non-transferable beyond, uh, excuse me, within that first 5-year period, um, if we were to apply for a grant, this grant and be successful, um, there was at the beginning there was a possibility that these buses would become ours, and we would have challenges that we would not be able to overcome with operating and owning the buses. Again, First Student is currently engaged in a one-year contract with us, creating another barrier, and then considerable engineering work that has to be done to determine the charging infrastructure. There's questions about flood zone and how the infrastructure would be put in place. There's questions with the utility that still need to be addressed around the size of the charging infrastructure and how it impacts the surrounding area and grid, the electrical load to the area that is impacted directly around where the bus yard is. Additionally, if NHPS were to apply, First Student would still have the title of the buses. This was something that came out in our recent conversations with First Student, and the buses again are not transferable. So even though we would be going through the grant process and obtaining the buses, we would not have the ability to transfer them to a different contractor should a different contractor be awarded the contract for long-term busing next year. Buses, so there's a considerable cost to the charging infrastructure that's not covered by the competitive grant. The way that the competitive grant is currently structured, uh, we have to have all of the engineering and pricing all laid out ahead of our application. And with the limited timeline that we had with First Student, it was just not feasible that all of that be completed. That also includes, as part of the grant, the bus company would be required to transition out a number of their buses. And in our current system, we have a number of different bus types, and those bus types are tied to the routes that they travel. They're tied to the type of system or transportation that is being provided. And with that comes a requirement by the grant to determine which of our busing inventory will be sunsetted as part of the grant award. And that's a process that First Student is currently going through, so that we can be prepared for another round of grant awards in the future. So as you can see from the timeline that I've put out for this, the current competitive grant has a application deadline of August 22nd, which is tomorrow. Obviously, that is something that we are not going to meet. There were too many barriers to us putting together an application that made sense for the district and for First Student. So we have chosen not to move forward with that. That grant would have been awarded in March of 2024. And the earliest that we would receive a bus would be June of 25. So those two things in and of themselves created some contractual issues, again, around how those buses would be owned and operated, and how the charging infrastructure would be implemented. There is a possible grant opportunity coming this October. That is another rebate grant opportunity. That would be considered round 3 of 5. It's very similar to the previous grant, and will be awarded sometime around the February-March timeline. The grant deadline has not yet been determined. So First Student and I have had several conversations around how we can best prepare for that grant. And at this point, we are in a good place with getting all of the needed information between First Student and the City of New Haven Transportation Department, myself, legal, and others, to be able to successfully apply for this grant. Being that this is being awarded around the same time, we felt that it would be more advantageous for us to be able to get all of our ducks in a row, so to speak, and apply for this grant. And again, even with this grant, the earliest that we would receive a bus would be June of 2025.
All right. Is that the end of the presentation?
Yes.
All right. Comments or questions from the committee? Dr. Yarbrough.
Yes, thank you very much for the walkthrough. Just a couple of questions for clarification. Rebate grant versus competitive grant. So rebate as in we make the purchases up front and then they refund us for those purchases. Is that how the round 3 would work?
Sort of. The way that I understand it is, in the competitive grant, we are required to put out a budget and have all of the engineering and planning done ahead of time. In the rebate style grant, that is not required. Basically, they give you the money and you figure it out. Whereas in the competitive grant, you figure it out and then you get the money. That's the way that it was explained to me by the team at First Student.
Okay, and so neither involve pre-purchasing buses, electric buses, but just the cost of planning around the infrastructure.
Correct.
For such a move.
It's the level of planning that kind of goes into obtaining what you would apply for.
Okay, thank you. So outside of that, are both grants the same? So whatever question I asked is pretty much the same. Okay. Does the grant stipulate who the owner of the electric buses has to be?
Yes.
And what does it say?
So the owner of the buses would stay, the owner of the vehicle would stay with first student, and the applicant of the grant has to retain ownership of those buses for a period of 5 years before they could be transferred to another party.
So New Haven Public School would be the applicant?
The applicant would be first student applying on our behalf. Because we fall within the region that first student serves, first student would be and they're our provider. They have to apply for the buses on behalf of New Haven Public Schools.
Right, but in the conversation in the previous slide, when you spoke about first student owning the buses, New Haven Public Schools owning the buses.
So in the previous grant, not this one that we're
round 2 or not round 2?
In round 1,
okay.
The only entity that could apply for a bus was the municipality. So that would have to be the city of New Haven. That does not, in round 2, that does not mean that municipalities cannot apply for the buses, but it would depend on the ownership of the vehicle. So if I'm a municipality and I own and operate my own fleet, then I am absolutely able to apply. If I am a municipality that does not own or operate or have the capacity to, similar to New Haven, then those vehicles would be purchased in the same manner that all of the other vehicles under the contract are, through the provider.
Okay, thank you. And does this grant have to reflect current practice, or can it reflect what we intend to do, what a district intends to do if it received an award?
I'm not clear on that. I would think that it would not matter, but I would need to dig into that a little bit.
Okay, thank you. I mean, one of my curiosities around transportation is about us owning our own buses, in part because a big chunk of the discussion between the vendors was around the cost of replacing buses and purchasing new buses, and us paying for it even though we don't own it. And it seems to me that it might be advantageous for us to own our own electric fleet, understanding there are costs associated with it, and you've outlined some of the costs. But I wonder what flexibility that could give us, and even potentially what the resale value of these vehicles might be. And I don't know. I do hear you in terms of the barriers for New Haven Public School owning its own fleet. But if we're going to move in the direction of electrifying some or all of our buses, we're going to have to store, if we rent them, we're going to have to store them somewhere anyway. And they're going to have to be charging stations for them anyway. So some of that infrastructure is going to need to be built. But just a clarification question on that. Currently, where First Student rents its own lot or field for storage, is that outside of the city of New Haven?
No.
So it's inside the city of New Haven. Is it owned by us, or is it private? I mean, is it owned by the city, or it's a private?
It's owned by a private party.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate the walkthrough. I don't know if this is going to the board, but I think it might be, it could be beneficial to look at what the possibilities are, and like expand a little bit more on if we were to go for this round 3, which I think we should. I think we should go for round 2, but I recognize that's the due date of tomorrow. So if we're going to go with round 3, maybe, you know, what the investment would be if we had to pay, or what the investment would be if we went with our own fleet that we owned and we submitted the application, and what the investment would look like, you know, pros and cons if we continue to ask a vendor to supply that for us. Yeah. Thank you.
So I understand what you're asking. And one of the things that we talked extensively about was our capacity within to be able to manage a fleet. And we are, as a department for transportation, we're just not staffed appropriately to be able to do that. And in conversations with our legal counsel and with others, anything is possible with a contract. However, is that something that is that a possibility that or a avenue that we want to move through, given our limited capacity to manage what we already have?
When you say anything is possible with a contract in what sense are you speaking about?
A contract with a third party to so if we own our vehicles, we would have to have some kind of contract with either First Student or another provider to maintain what we're purchasing, because we as a district do not have the capacity, ability, or facilities to be able to manage that additional type of vehicle to our what we sort of have as a fleet with our district vehicles. But transportation for with buses requires a much more detailed approach to maintenance that we just do not have the ability to provide.
Yeah, I mean, my thought is we're paying for it anyway. We're just paying for somebody else to do it for their own fleet. So it might be worth exploring, you know, if we did have to pay, and it sounds like we would, which I acknowledge, you know, what that investment would be and who possibly could do it. So even if it's not a direction we end up going, I think it's worth showing 2 or 3 options for us.
All right, thank you. Dr. Negron, I think I saw your hand briefly. Do you have a comment, or I had a question or comment myself, but I'm happy to refer to you.
So I raised my hand previously, but Dr. Yarbo noticed that I wanted to call attention to the due date for the round 2. And again, realizing that this was released prior to my arrival, just wanted to make sure that there was due diligence in taking a look at it, what it is, what it isn't. And then next, just want to make sure that we get clarity in terms of if you want us to explore, and of course it would have to go to the entire board, right? So that we understand exactly what direction you want us to take as it relates to round 3. Because we know that is supposed to be, from what we're told, there is supposed to be another grant, right, being released, so that at least we are ready for when it gets released, in the event that we are going to decide to proceed with an application.
So I'll just, I have a couple things. One is, if you could go to the first slide, So I'm happy to see that these folks are working hard on the issue. What I heard is that it's a very complicated issue. It's complicated not only by board decision to go with a one-year contract, but even in that case, it would still be complicated by the grant having a 5-year window before buses could be transferred to another owner. And our contracts are only allowed to be I think 3 years or 5. I don't recall. I think we were going with a 3-year contract to begin with. So there's just issues related to that. There's issues related to trying to identify where these things would be charged, who would be building out that infrastructure, which is probably not buying a power strip, but some major infrastructure to charge very large batteries so that they're ready to go the next day. I would lead in future versions of this with slide 3, just to show that this is not the only opportunity. This was the next opportunity, and that there are subsequent opportunities to put this in context. I also note from my previous research on this with the World Resources Institute that tracks things like buses and the amount of electric buses. There's 5,612 buses committed in the United States as of April 2023, and close to 500,000 school buses. So 5,600 electric are ordered, committed, not operating yet, but they're getting there, up against close to 500,000 school buses in operation. So this is the beginning of electrification. So I think that it's good that this group is together, and hopefully that this next round can be applied for. I think this needs to come with a statement that the district from the superintendent is committed to this. The city has already committed in the Alders 2019 climate resolution towards electrification of city vehicles. And so I think leading with that commitment that this is not the only opportunity, and that the right people are in the room, in spite of the fact that some of these folks only have a contract for another 10 months with us, where we would have had more stability if we had gone with a longer contract. I think my final thing, I'll just say that I think that I own a car. I think it would be quite difficult to own a fleet of cars, and it would have a lot of issues related to that, and that we, of course, should be looking at when to bring something in-house and when to use outside contractors. We've discussed this already earlier today with ACES. So it is something that we should look at periodically. But I also think that the amount of infrastructure that it costs, while one is a for-profit company, that also means that it's a for-profit company that's going through a competitive bid process, which means that they're dialing it in for the best value, where this would be just one little thing that we're doing. It's a big thing. But this is just one thing we're doing in the entire operation of the school system. So while it should be looked at, I don't know that we're going to see that we're going to be able to run this as efficiently as companies where it's their only job at the scale that this is at. But that's not to say it shouldn't be looked at. And my final thing that I'll just say, that I do think that if some of the issues are related around charging and things like that, that there might be some ways for the charging infrastructure to be on city property, maybe next to a school. I don't know if there's space over by Central Kitchen or something where buses could be charged. That might help alleviate some of those things. But it looks to me like you have the right people in the room to look at all those possibilities, like the city engineer, as well as our transportation experts, as well as our current vendor. But that might help with some of those things. So I think those are the first things that are coming to my mind on this. And then I have my final thing is just a process. How are you all planning on notifying the rest of the board? and our partners like the climate change student group and the other group that's offered to help in this, so that they know that it's not like New Haven Schools is saying, no, we don't care about this. It's that New Haven Schools is saying, we evaluated this opportunity and this particular one is not going to work for us. Our next target is the October opportunity.
I think, and Dr. Negron can please let me know if I'm speaking out of turn, but I think the best place to move from here would be to draft a very detailed memo and outlining what was discussed today and what the next steps would be and how we would continue to engage with this group, the board, and members of the community to be able to ensure that we're at a place where we can confidently move toward the next grant.
That sounds like a very good idea to me. I would lead with the information I mentioned, and I would also make sure that that's getting to those other groups, particularly the one that was offering some resources. I'm blanking on his name and the name of the group he was representing, but that also might be another person who will want to talk about this, or might have other possibilities or resources. It sounds like there's a huge amount of troubles and challenges and things, but there's commitment to continue to work through those, because there's the greater commitment to trying to have non-diesel buses, more efficient or less polluting. Dr. Yorba, I saw you had your hand up again. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Yes. Mr. Wilcox, I agree with what you said about like reversing the slide order. I mean, yes, yeah. Just do that. I think that would be positive. And I also wanted to point out something, Mr. Wilcox, that you pointed out in terms of the first slide where we list who's been involved in the conversation. I just wrote in my notes for us to have community and industry partners who are part of this conversation. People who have ideas and resources and also think about this. Some of our university partners. I agree that the gentleman who spoke at our last board meeting indicated that he has interest and capacity and perhaps professional skill in this area. So a question and a couple of comments. My question is, what's the current goal or thinking around the potential October grant? Like what is the interest from our school district as you think about it?
Tom, excuse me. Again, I wanted to make sure that there was due diligence in reading and understanding exactly what an application would entail, so that we knew what exactly are we dealing with. Second is, we know that there is commitment, right, to this climate resolution. So we wanted at the very least to come before finance and operations today and give you the findings of our quick research, knowing, right, that we were facing this deadline of tomorrow, which is not possible at all, even if we wanted to then be able to fully understand, yes, there's another opportunity. And as I mentioned earlier, I want to make sure that there is full commitment from the board saying, yes, please move forward with exploring that grant, that other opportunity to apply, that we know will be forthcoming. Having said that, I completely agree with you that we have to leverage the people that are committed to this work, like the gentleman who made the comment at the board meeting last Monday or so. And again, leveraging others that have expertise in this area, so that at least get the homework done ahead of time, engage those people in the conversation. So by the time this new grant rolls around, that we again are ahead of it in being able to put together an application.
Thank you. Dr. Negron, from the board, are you looking for the board to collectively say, put time and resources and energy in exploring this? Is that what you mean?
I am interested in having that statement from the board, because as you heard, right, this would mean that we are committing, if we do apply, to address all the barriers that we already know would be in front of it. But what we're saying is, yeah, we're going to apply because we have the full commitment that we will still figure out how to do this, because we're committed to doing things in a new way, despite the multiple challenges that currently exist.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that I support that, and I think that's reasonable. And I'm trying to think how to go about it or how to present it. I mean, the way tonight's presentation came across to me is that 2 points. One, there's no time, but there's also no interest. And I don't know that I don't necessarily know that's true, but I also don't know that that's what we want the debate or conversation to be at the board level. I guess from my perspective, I think maybe the board should decide, do we want the district to explore the possibilities around this and be ready to apply if there is something that you or us collectively think is feasible for us to do. So I'm a little, Mr. Wilcox, I don't know what your recommendations are, but I'm a little concerned that there might be a conversation around, that the conversation won't be actually to give Dr. Negron what you're asking for, or what you need to explore further.
So we have in the climate resolution from the board last year, which is, I'll put it in the chat right now. You already have from the board explicit approval to attempt to mobilize resources from whatever federal, state, city authorities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to reduce transportation carbon emissions and other air pollution, including electrifying all school buses and other Board of Education vehicles by 2030. You already have that authority, directive, desire, goal to have these. And again, these are attempt to mobilize and aim to create a plan and to do this by 2030. So you already have that. And I'll note, it doesn't say thou shalt do electric buses and thou shalt apply for the thing on August 22nd. It's to electrify buses, but also if there's other ways, like I have no idea, propane buses or hybrid buses or other things would also help reduce some of those things. So I think you already have that. And so I wouldn't reopen that question. I would just rest on this, because until this is rescinded, that's what you have. I would get across that this is not lack of desire, interest, or lack of taking this seriously. It's that this was a particular opportunity there'll be other particular opportunities. And it's how are you going to string together particular opportunities? It's not like having a few buses or 10 buses or 5 buses, however many this would have yielded, would have solved our 320 bus routes that we do a day. So, but it's concrete steps towards that future of no carbon emissions. So it's how are you going to keep moving forward, looking at these opportunities, and it is going to take working with a wide variety of groups, including our bus transportation vendor. Dr. Yarber?
Yeah, the other piece that is real for me that I want to just bring forward as we continue, real talk is around asthma that comes from air pollution and the health disparities associated with asthma in urban settings. And so there's a real, I think the financial cost, the financial investment is one category. I think the personnel investment is another real category. And I also think, our children being born, living in New Haven, and having a higher risk of developing childhood asthma that could lead to adult asthma. That we could impact in some fashion or some timeline is also a valid factor that I think should counterweight maybe the enthusiasm or the interest around what's possible. I do not know, but it might be the case that, the city has its own bus routes. I think city buses, I don't know who owns them. The universities have their own buses and transportation fleets. And I just wonder if there is interest in or already a concerted and collaborative effort or desire for one around the infrastructure, around the maintenance, and maybe even additional insight as to whether battery powered is what's desired or needed. Batteries have their own environmental impact that needs to be weighed. And so, Mr. Wilcox said, maybe it's propane, maybe it's another, natural gas or something else that could be used. Maybe it's hybrid versus all electric. I think personally, as a board member, I'm just very interested in us to say if we wanted to do this, or what are the things we want to do? And if we wanted to do it, what would it actually cost to get there in all these different categories? And what would it, and cost includes the barriers for it and the investments and the partnerships that we might need. And one request that I have is like trusting the board to really weigh and hold all that information. If we can make a decision, make a decision. But yeah, just to kind of be open-handed in the pursuit. But part of me is wondering just, everybody who is listed on that list for who's around the table, like if they only see barriers, then we need to get other people around the table who maybe lean on the other side and only see opportunities. And then we might find a medium in terms of what's possible. But it may be the case that people, everyone, all the professionals who are on that current list around the table really do have an interest in seeing this happen and are realistic about the costs, but also the potential benefits.
And again, I want to reiterate, I think you asked at the beginning, right? Was there the will or the interest? I forgot how you framed it.
Yes.
And the will is there. I just wanted to make sure that this was about clarifying what happened that we did not get to that first application. I wanted to make that very, very clear. What were their learnings as it relates to that particular application? In now learning that there may be another opportunity that we may be able to seize. So I want to reiterate the commitment to look into the possibilities are there, but I wanted everybody to be very clear about timeline as it related to this opportunity that is about to close tomorrow.
Yeah. One last question on that. Do we have someone, in addition to first student, because I think I heard first, not in this conversation, but maybe at a board meeting, that first student is a lead applicant in either this effort or these types of grants. Do we have someone additional who can provide advice, wisdom, insight, who is not our vendor with self-interest or professional interest in what we decide and how we decide?
I think the gentleman that spoke on at a public comment might be somebody that might have something. I think the board would be amenable if there was a consultant that could be found for this. I know money is extremely tight, especially since, I mean, related to transportation, we're spending more on transportation this year than we could have, which does, you know, add to our budget needs that we need to mitigate. And so it's not like we're swimming in money, but maybe there's some ESSER money or some grant funded source that could do this. I also think lobbying with the state, this is not just an issue for us, it's an issue for Bridgeport, Hartford, Waterbury, you know. And my final thought is on this, our number one way of reducing our carbon emissions on our school buses is what needs to happen, in my opinion, is doing all the work of trying to look at our school choice program, because we're busing kids all over town rather than making every school a magnet school, every school people want to be at in their neighborhood. We're moving people around, but there's huge amounts of money attached to that, where savings in transportation in terms of dollars and carbon and pollution would be loss of funds going towards those other schools. So until we see the actual numbers, it's easy for me to say that, but I know that that's just the beginning of work that needs to be done. But if we didn't have to have 315 routes, then we had to have 250 routes, for instance. We just cut our carbon emissions by significant amounts without a single electric bus.
Yes. Yeah. I support all that. And there might be, on the consultant side, there might be someone from any one of our universities that might in kind do it as well.
Again, yeah, I don't know that we have transportation programs at the area universities, but we might.
True.
So in the interest of time, maybe we can move on from this one. And just as a final thing, you had a question, Dr. Yarbrough. So CT Transit, the city buses or CT Transit, which is Connecticut Department of Transportation owns.
So state. Okay.
State owns, and all the universities, to my knowledge, outsource their transportation to private contractors.
Okay.
For a while, Yale was using DATCO. I don't know who they're using now, but Quinnipiac does the same. I know Southern. So these are all things that, even for their small scale transportation, isn't worth having in-house.
Yes. Thank you.
Mr. Lamb?
Just an item to note, we do have approximately 40 propane buses and the infrastructure to support that.
Oh, great.
I did not know that.
I didn't know that. Cool.
All right. There are some policy related things, unless there's zero comment on safety, security. I mean, the security related ones are just to introduce it. to ask for input so that we can get those going. And then there was the facilities use one, which if it's not ready to go, I'm happy to move it to the next agenda in the interest of time. But if there's no more input at this stage, I'll move that we move it to governance and it can be further discussed there. But it's up to, I'll leave this to Dr. Negron to decide if you all want another look at it before we do that. Because I know governance likes us to kind of have things done before they get it.
My apologies, got distracted because I'm trying to find the charger to plug my laptop or else I'm gonna get quickly disconnected.
No problem.
Okay, we'll carry over the facilities use one to the next meeting and have a more substantive discussion, hopefully on the information security related ones. Does that sound doable?
Sounds good.
Okay, I think that was all the agenda items. And I will love a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I second it. Dr. Yarbrough?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.